Q&A. Sorry, I noticed. We'll leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A to open it up. So yeah, a little done with housekeeping. Cool. So quick more intro, and then I'll hand it off to our panelists. So again, today's panel topic is inclusion within tech, and part of the Dish Women's Network goals is to create an inclusive work environment. So this is a super important topic for us that we're excited to dive into today. And really key to inclusion is allyship, whether it's men supporting women, women supporting women, and of course allyship goes beyond gender to just really those in privilege supporting those that are marginalized. So thank you for all of you for showing up and for your support today. And for those that are not already a Dish Women's Network member, I'd encourage you to sign up, which you can do at our website, dishwomensnetwork.com. We're open and encourage anyone to join. And on that same note, I was telling our panelists earlier that I'm always encouraging people to join any or multiple Dish employee resource groups that you're not part of that demographic. It's a really easy way to connect with those who have different perspectives and learn from them and continue to educate yourself on how to be an ally and drive inclusivity. So with that, we will jump into our questions. So we'll start. We'll have the panelists, if you go ahead and introduce yourselves. And then after your introduction, if you can share what inclusion means to you. So, and I forgot to introduce our panelists. Key part. So our panelists are Sunita Dwivedi. She's with the IT team on the Dish side. Kathy Hoffman-Gillis, joining us all the way from her car, driving through Nebraska right now. She's a senior manager on wireless. And then we have Cici Hua, senior product manager on the Dish side. And then Carlita Ray, director of platforms and program management for Boost. Okay, back to the first question. Sunita, go for it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sunita Dwivedi. I'm IT manager with Dish, and I lead the customer master product team out of the downtown office in Denver. Before this, before working in this team, I've worked at the data science team within Dish, and before that, I was with the ERP team at Dish. And in the past, this Dish is my first in-house IT job. Before that, I have worked for Deloitte and a couple of other consulting firms. It's a very different shift, but I'm here, so I really like it. For me, inclusion in tech means opportunity. Opportunity being presented equally. That's the key for me. And as we go through this session, we'll definitely go more of that. But that's it from my side.
Awesome. And Kathy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kathy, and I am in the wireless department. With moving to 5G, I've been working on setting up and staffing several teams, including our property management, lease administration, regulatory and compliance, title, finance, and then all of the T-Mobile assets. So it's been very busy, very fun. Prior to that, I've been at Dish about 2 years, but I have been in the wireless industry longer than I care to admit. There's a 3 and a 0 in my number of years in the industry, so it's been a long time in many different positions. And inclusion to me, you kind of stole my thunder there too, is opportunity, and it's creating those opportunities for folks and being aware of your surroundings, being aware of other people to make sure that you are helping create opportunities not only for yourself, but for those around you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. All right, Cici.
Sure, yeah, so I'm Cici Hua, and you can call me Cici. I'm a product manager at Dish TV Group. Our job responsibility is to understand Dish customers' needs and incorporate with the latest technology to deliver a product that solves their problem and improve their user experience. One of the key components, I would say, for this role is to also ensuring that the product that we build or support the company's overall strategy and the goals. Previously, before I joined the product team, I was working as a software engineer for Dish almost for 10 years. So I think because thanks to the experience that I'm able to know our product inside out, and also define what is needed in terms that a development team can easily understand and build a good relationship with them faster. On my personal side, I'm married and have 2 kids. I like cooking and hiking in my spare time. Talking about inclusion, I think in my mind, again, second on like Kathy and Sunita, that I think for inclusion to me is doesn't matter despite the difference of like age or race or nationality. We have the equally being heard or treated respectfully and being shared the same resource and opportunities to be successful in the work environment. And also, I think like we all know that to have an inclusion work environment, there is a tons of benefit. Like for example, help the retention of the employees and improve the morality overall, I think. So that's my vision of inclusion.
Awesome. Thanks, Cece. All right, Carlita, if you can wrap us up on question number 1.
Hi, my name is Carlita Ray, and I am the director of the platform and the project management organization within Boost. Basically what we do project management, but I have very skilled platform managers that actually write requirements and translate the business strategy into actual technical requirements that IT can understand. I have been in IT my entire career. So believe it or not, I started coding COBOL with my first job at Sprint. I started in '98 and I stayed with Sprint IT for a good 8 years. I did requirements management before I relocated from the Reston, Virginia area to Irvine to come work for Boost. Where I still kind of stay technical, not as technical as I was when I was coding COBOL, but technology has always been fascinating to me. Even when I was coding, I did feel that there was this different world where I wanted to talk to people, so I couldn't stay behind the screen and actually code. But technology has always been something that I wanted to do, and I still very much enjoy it. Project management is something that I enjoy as well. Inclusion to me is everything that our panelists mentioned. You know, it's just inclusion. It's just including everyone, regardless of the biases and the stereotypes that we have. And if I had to simply put, you know, I've been in a lot of conversations, and we'll get deeper into this when we talk through some of our questions, but I've been asked before, what do I see the difference in inclusion and diversity? And so when I think about diversity, and I think about when I was in high school, because those were some of the best years of my life, I think about all the invites that went out to the party. I mean, all the invites that went out to different people for a party. So if you got an invite, to me, that was a diverse group of people, girls, boys, they were from different backgrounds, etc. And then inclusion for people that's in the party would be, you actually got asked to dance, to get on the dance floor and actually be included in the actual party. You weren't standing up against the wall. So for some people, inclusion is a little different. For me, and what we're going to get into, which is why I think this conversation is so important, is for a lot of people, diversity and inclusion all starts at the party. For me and for others, inclusion starts of getting that first invite in the first place to be able to come to the party. So I think that's where we're going to dig a little deeper. And I think that some of the answers and some of the things that we prepared to talk to you guys about will help kind of explain why inclusion and getting that first invite is most important.
Awesome. Thanks, Carlita. I love that analogy, something that super resonates. And I think I've had a lot of different conversations as well on if you know, whether it's at a party or at the workplace, if you build a diverse team or if you have a diverse team, that doesn't matter if there's not inclusion.
Exactly.
And you have to be able to amplify or give light to the voice, every voice in the room, and hear and recognize it equally. So I really like that analogy, and I think it's a really great way to kind of segue into other questions. So thank you for that. One of the studies that I think those of you who joined a few different Women's Network events I've noted quite a bit over the years. And so one of the McKinsey Women in the Workplace study by McKinsey and Lean In that came out most recently a few weeks ago with some updates. And over the years, it's shown one of the significant data points is representation. And their study continues to highlight that women in the workplace, especially in tech, are underrepresented and across all levels. And women of color are even more so. And in the most recent McKinsey study, in IT services and telecom, only 28% of first level managers are women. And when you get to the C-suite, only 16% are women. Especially for more senior leaders, this can mean you're often the only woman in the room or the woman in meetings or on a team. And I wanted to pause for a second to ask anyone on the call if you've been, whether it's the only woman or only person of color representing kind of who you are, if you've ever been kind of an only in the room before. So pretty common. And I wanted to kind of with that question, ask our panel if you can share, if at all, being the only person, only woman in the room, only woman on your team, how has that really impacted you? And I'll start with you, Carlita.
So I will tell you, I have somewhat of an advantage as far as being the only woman in the room. And it kind of started when I was young. So my dad raised me. I've never had a mom in the household. I never had sisters in the household. So it's me and my dad. And a lot of times I would be around uncles and cousins that were, of course, boys. And so the way my dad always raised me was to be bold, right? And what was really interesting is when I was young, we were able to have these anything goes sessions to where as long as I was respectful and I didn't use profanity, I was able to speak my mind. And that's how my father taught me. He just, at a very young age, I was taught to be bold. So that helped me. That helped me in my career because being the only woman in the room talking about technology or technical things, I grew up with that confidence of being able to speak and being bold, regardless of who was in the room. You asked specifically about women of color. I will tell you one thing that's very impactful, and I think one thing that has impacted my career is that for some of our peers, whether it be men of any ethnicity, when men or when other, I guess, cultures show that aggression, I think it's perceived as passionate. Wow, they're really passionate about their work. They're passionate about what they're talking about. But sometimes as a woman of color, it's perceived as this angry Black woman type stigma, right? And so what I had to do within my career is find that balance. I had to still be bold and be able to communicate without giving off an air of I was upset or I was angry. And I don't think that everybody has to deal with that. So that's one distinction of women of color. What we have to deal with is kind of just making sure that that aggression is coming off as being passionate like everyone else. It's not just, that I'm angry. I'm just passionate about exactly what I'm talking about. So I think those two things, being in the room, being able to walk in as a woman and say, hey, I know what I'm talking about, right? And I have no problem sharing with you the information that I have. I think what helps, though, is for those of you guys that maybe don't have the same experience, how you can be allies is sitting in there and being open. Right? If you see a woman in technology, don't automatically assume, I don't know if she knows what she's talking about. Like, give that person the opportunity to be clear and provide the facts, right? And that comes down to those unconscious biases. We have biases when we get in the room with people, and sometimes it's the way they talk, it's the way they look, it's what we've heard from other people. And so as we grow, we have to learn to break down them unconscious biases that will allow us to be open when women are communicating and when we're leaders within this field.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing all of that, Kalita. Incredibly important. Bias is, I think, the underlying piece of that, and the reason why the employee resource groups have been consistently offering bias trainings. I know the company, of course, this year as well has utilized and shared those. So those, of course, are only steps in taking and recognizing your biases. You have to have recognition and of not only yourself but others, and comes through in actions and stuff. So that's huge and super important. And I think you've touched on some of the other parts of that, on how if that at all has impacted you. Kind of what advice do you have for people that have similar experiences? And I know you already talked about allyship as well. If anybody else wants to jump in on the topic, or Carly, if you have more to share as well.
I want to add on to what Carlita said. Being bold is so important, and I think I did not have as much as of an upbringing where I was surrounded mostly by guys around me, but it was almost like 25, 75%. I think that does help in becoming a little bit oblivious of the ratio of people around you, and it helps you to just focus on what you like, what you want to work on, and just talk about it passionately. So I think it also helps to not become being conscious about it and becoming nervous about it has like a fine line. In today's day, do you want, if you're walking into a room and you're the only in the room, obviously that will come in your mind, but pushing it aside and just what you are there for. And, 99.9%, you will be there because you like the work you're doing, right? You want to talk about it. You want to move forward. Just concentrate on that. Don't let yourself distract. Don't let yourself become reactive. Being proactive and knowing what you want, I think, has always helped me when I have gotten nervous in a scenario like that, or if I have faced any type of aggressions. I've always had to come back and just like calm myself down. It's like, it's all right. I'm here because I like doing this. Somebody thinks I can't or I can doesn't affect my capabilities of being able to do it or not. I know I can.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. I love that. Cece, you unmuted. Jump in.
Yeah, right. So I think I totally agree with the boldness and also be transparent and open communication. Like, I think it's kind of a human nature that you tend to unconsciously, sometimes maybe consciously, to gravitate toward people that like you or the same group. So because it provides some ease or safety. But I think, like any habit, we can set an intention and then choose to do it different to include other people. And then if you see an issue in the workplace, say something. And I'm also trying to get better at that, because I think that sometimes, like, I'm not very sensitive sometimes, and then to be more have more empathy on other people, how they're feeling. And also, if you are assigned a project, and then maybe ask people who is underrepresented group to ask their opinion, their feedback, or ask their help, or maybe even let them to take over, to give them the opportunities to like build an ally. So that's what I'm thinking for this part.
Yeah. Thanks, Lucy. That's awesome. One thing that kind of popped into my head, which I think is kind of two-faced. One, two-faced sounds super negative. Two sides to it. I think that for myself, regardless of kind of who I am, I'm someone that is more outspoken, and I'm going to give my opinion. And so even for myself in that respect, I try to make sure that I'm actively listening. And when people who may not be as bold or speak so directly, make sure that when they want to speak, either literally make sure that they don't get interrupted or ask them to complete what they were saying, or I try to proactively look around and see if people are about to speak, and then someone else talks, and make sure that we can physically get back to what that person is saying. And studies show that women are interrupted more often by both men and women. So it's something that everybody can be actively conscious on, and make sure that those in the room voices and opinions are heard and amplified, whether they're a woman or anybody else from that sense. So I like a lot of the tactical things that you guys all touched on. Any other thoughts before I move on to the next question?
Just one thing to add to everything that everyone told. So some of my experiences have been where obviously, you are categorized because you're a woman, you're categorized to be in that sensitive zone. She reacted this way because she's a woman. I mean, obviously people don't say it out loud, but that is how we are perceived. If we say out something, and if we are opinionated about something, if we have strong opinions about something. So, some of my experiences have been that where somebody is talking about, another woman in the room, and they just happen to tell that, okay, she's a little sensitive, don't you think so? And I mean, I always try to stick, unbiased, of the gender, and I tell that, this is person's opinion because this is how they feel. And I have always felt very strongly about that, that people feel because, we express ourselves, and maybe sometimes it can be a little loud, but I have seen, and nothing against men, right? But I have seen that where people pass quick judgment, about women's opinion, and tag it as being sensitive. So just, agree to everything that you guys said, but I wanted to just make sure I add this point as well.
I have just one piece of advice, and I know we got to keep moving because there are several things that we want to get to. But, one thing piece of advice that I provide to that is I'll always try to stick to the facts. Because I'll be honest with you, being passionate about what we do sometimes, it's not just us. Men get emotional as well, right? And so we put emotions into it. And so what I would challenge someone that says that person is being overly sensitive, I would kind of step back and ask that person, well, can we just separate what you feel is her emotion versus what's fact? What factual information is she's providing, and how much of the truth is to that? Because one thing that I've always learned is you can't argue with fact, right? You can't put emotions, you can't tie emotions to fact. So I have been in a situation like that before. And I think what has helped me in the past is just when people try to attach the sensitivity to women and they feel this way. No, just start documenting some facts, or start throwing some facts out there and see how emotional that person really is, or what they're bringing up really the truth. Can't argue with facts.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that, Kalita, and that ties back to the competence part of people kind of questioning that potentially, and sticking to the facts. I think is huge. It's great. Cool. As you mentioned, we do have some other topics to grab to or to go to. So this is a question. Thanks to Sunita for kind of crafting this one. So the world we work in today has its roots in women not even being allowed in it. We've come a long way in the last few decades, but acceptance and equal treatment toward women in the workplace has a ways to go. How do we navigate this oftentimes unfriendly atmosphere, and how can we be the catalyst to change this landscape? And we can start with Kathy.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been in the industry for a very long time, and when I moved over to the engineering team in wireless, I moved as a project manager, building new cell sites, and I happened to sit next to the administrative assistant. And if she was gone, all of the men dropped their copies off for me to make copies of. People actually asked me to get coffee for them. And just because I sat next to a person who, in her role, those were part of her role, but I was the only woman, and so they assumed that was my role too when she wasn't there. So this is a topic that it's taken me a very long time to prove myself, to show that I'm not that. I have a engineering role here. I am more competent than that. And I think a lot of the things that I had to do to overcome that was, be factual, be open in my communication, take my emotions out of it, and sometimes bounce it off of another male. Find a male that, whether it is a spouse or a brother or a father or a coworker, somebody that you can, both speak to and say, okay, hey, am I viewing this logically, am I taking my emotion out of this? You know, just kind of bouncing off of what's your point of view on how I'm handling this? And then also finding somebody or someone, you know, as a male who can support your story, support your side of it, not take over it and not own it, but be as supportive of your story. And sometimes I've gone into meetings where I know that I was going to potentially have a uphill battle to get my points across. And I'll have a conversation with somebody before that where I'll start my conversation and ask them to be, you know, play a supporting role for me and be an advocate for me.
Yeah, no, that's great, Kathy, and thank you for sharing that incredibly, I'm sure, frustrating scenario that was persistent. And yeah, thank you for sharing. And yeah, having those bounce off ideas and conversations, and you know, sometimes it can be tough to recognize who is an ally, but they, I think, come up organically over time, whether another person, especially, you know, males that either reach out or, you know, you say something and have that conversation, and you're like, oh, this is someone that, again, I can bounce ideas off of, like, exactly, like, they're going to be in the same meeting with me. I'm going to ask them, you know, to amplify what I'm saying or kind of back me up for sure. I think that's tactical, kind of super important way to do it. And if you're, you know, a woman or a man on here and you have the opportunity to do that for someone else, definitely encourage you to do that.
Yeah, and adding on to what Kathy said, right, about allies, seeking them, asking for help is, yes, you do feel vulnerable when you think about, you know, doing anything like this, but that is a very, very important thing. I've definitely learned in my career that I need allies when I am not sure or I am feeling that I'm in an unfriendly zone. Who can help me navigate this? Finding mentors doesn't have to be a woman. I've definitely had mentors in both the genders, and that has helped me so much to be where I am. Finding a good mentor is, at least I feel, is very important. And a lot of times what I have noticed is, like, if I have a male mentor, it has helped them to gain this empathy towards what women are facing, because they never saw that side, or an ally for that matter. Because they were not in the position, they were not talked about this. Now we have panel discussions, right? At least we can bring out our experiences, but not everybody comes to these, right? So it also gives an opportunity for men especially to see what, you know, women see from our lenses, and then they can help us, to Kathy's point, to navigate it, right? How do we define our own way, but with help of our allies and mentors? That is very critical in my mind, to progress in any career path you are in.
And if I could just add on to that, I think it's really important to point out specific examples to folks when things happen. Just, for example, in my personal life, I've gone into car dealerships with my husband to take care of maintenance on my car. My car is in my name, and I'll walk in, and the guy turns and starts talking to my husband about it. And it took a while for my husband to he didn't even notice it. He didn't see it as an issue until I started pointing it out. Hey, are you seeing this? So when you see something in the moment, point it out, because so many folks, they just don't realize what's happening or what's going on. They're not trying to be disrespectful. They just don't notice it.
That's right. Yeah. Great. Thanks for the discussion too in the chat. Awesome. Thanks, Kathy and Sneha. So kind of diving into our next question. So part of inclusion is accepting and respecting others. And people often talk about how an inclusive environment can allow people to be their authentic selves and bring their authentic selves to work. Do you feel you can bring your authentic self to work? Cece, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So if I was asked the question 2 years ago, when I newly transferred to this current role, I probably would say no, because I completely changed my career path from engineering to business. The adventure overall is very fun, However, there are some times that can be like stressful and make me second guess myself if I make the right decision for this career path change. I think sometimes I would keep my thoughts to myself because I was afraid of I'm being different from everyone else in the team, right? So one thing that I think helped a lot in this transition for me is bring the food to share with the team during our weekly breakfast club. This may sound very simple, like food, but I think, however, like nothing else is better than food to represent who you are or your culture and unite people and celebrate diversity, right? I think you guys probably all agree with me. I just so I felt like, for example, my culture and heritage are being accepted when I received the appreciation and compliments from the food I made from my colleagues. I think it helped me to open up myself and also embrace my diversity. And that's one example. And then another example, like right now, for example, when I was doing this panel and I saw all my team members in the meeting that to support me. So it's all these kind of things that they're doing that to create this healthy environment for me to feel like comfortable to share my thoughts and bring my authentic self to work. So I think it's really critical to value the difference and create environments where people feel comfortable. And also, I don't think that's not one people's responsibility, and it's everyone contribute to that. It's could be from top down, from the executive level, and also from bottom to up, that everyone have some idea and trying to participate and more engagement to the work environment, because we spend 1/3 of time like with the people around us. So create a healthy environment, I think is very critical.
So I'll just add on to that part, just about being your authentic self. So I'll be 100% honest. I feel somewhat, right? And I'll just give you the example is that part of my culture, as Cece was explaining her culture with her food, but part of my culture are braids, right? And so when I go on vacation or when I feel I don't have to do big presentations, I like to have my hair braided. And this is a true story. So when Boost and Dish were divesting, we were going to have this big leadership meeting, directors and above, where they were going to bring everyone together. And when I got the email, I had braids in my hair, true story. And it was going to be that following Monday. I think it was a Thursday. And immediately I felt, okay, I need to take these braids out of my hair. Now, part of me, I will admit, is part of my own insecurity. And I think it's because of earlier on in my career, I do remember providing a presentation and I was the only African-American there. And I was kind of stubborn at that age. So I'm like, I'm not taking my braids out. I just sat and had this done in my hair. I'm going to present with my braids. And honestly, the questions that came after my presentation was more about, how long did it take your hair? Do you get your hair like it? I felt that it was a distraction because the material that I was presenting, I didn't get questions on. I got questions about my hair. And so some people would think that that's not a big factor, but the fact that here in California, that Governor Newsom, he had to provide a law that says that you can no longer discriminate. Even in elementary school, our babies are discriminated against because of natural hairstyles that they have. So when I saw this question, I say, part of me, I feel like I can bring my natural self to work. My team know me. I don't have to put on a facade of who I am. But as far as my culture and wanting to go into a meeting with my hair braided, I just feel there's this stigma or stereotypes. And again, it's not that people do it on purpose, but when you have not, and it's the same situation with me, if you haven't been raised or in different neighborhoods with different people, and if you don't educate yourself, then the media will educate you subconsciously. So the things you see on TV, the things you hear, the people that you are around. And so that goes back to the unconscious biases and the stereotypes that we talk about. So I feel like I can be myself, who I am, expressing. Yes, I feel like that culturally, not so much, right? Now, what I will tell you is that my team is awesome. Some of them are here today, and we're all different, right? And I respect that. And I know that when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking inclusion as far as maybe gender, religion, race, creed. But I think what we sometimes miss is also inclusion on ideas. Right. And so Steve Jobs said it best, right? What I like most about his book is he said, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people for them to tell us. You're going to go out and hire these folks that really, you're like, that person knows their craft. This is a person for the job. However, you're not going to be or include their ideas. What's the point? What's the point, right? So you have to not just think about inclusion as far as our differences and our characteristics, but you have to think about inclusion in our ideas and the decisions that we make. And I know I'm kind of going into the other question, but one thing that has helped me is being a teachable leader. Right. And in order for me to be teachable, I have to include my entire team's ideas on the decisions that I make. I don't feel like I have to make all the decisions solo, because that's a part of inclusion. It is soliciting ideas from your team, incorporating their ideas. And, you know, I'll end on this one with this question is inclusion has taught me a lot, because so I laugh about this because one of my teammates, and we just talked about being a perfectionist, right? And so I will tell you, there are certain ways I like to do things. But what I've learned in my 23 years being in tech is that, and I heard my grandmother say it a long time ago, and I didn't quite understand it, but there's always one way, more than one way to skin a cat. And so when I step back and start letting my team, once my team and I agreed on the end state and we agreed on that timeline to get to the end state, then I kind of backed up as a manager and as a leader to say, how you get there, I want to let you determine that. And that's my way of including your ideas. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. And I've learned one or two things happen. Either that employee came back to me and said, oh, it took me a little longer than what I anticipated, but this is what I learned. That's growth. But I will tell you, in my career, I've also, by stepping back and letting them do it the way they want to do it and not always think that my idea is the best way, is when they came back and said, well, this is how I did it. The first thing I look at, did we get to that end state we agreed upon? Yes, we did. Did we meet the timeline? Yes, we did. And then I'll say, well, how did you do that? And they tell me, and I would have never thought to do it that way. But if I wasn't open to including their ideas and their methods of how to do things, it would always be my way. And as a manager and a leader, I would never grow because I would always think my way is the only way. So I just challenge this form that when we're thinking about inclusion, yes, we're thinking about gender and race and religion, but let's also think about inclusion with your team's ideas, because that's how we grow as a team.
Yeah, no, thank you, Carly. That's huge. And thank you for diving deep into that. I think that's incredibly important and absolutely noteworthy. And I am sure, I'm glad that your team members are on here, hearing you say that as well. And definitely need to have more leaders like yourself thinking about it that way. That's huge, and definitely the Steve Jobs quote, absolutely. And I think that's something from, being in product management myself, we talk a lot about on bias, and part of our responsibility, and you mentioned your team too, gathering requirements on, you need to be gathering the facts and the objective. And, there's some people on the team where, like, I personally like sports a lot. And so I talk sports with some people, and I spend a lot of time with them, but I need to make sure that just my similarities with people aren't biasing the ideas that I hear and the information that I gather, and being able to make my recommendations at my job. So I definitely love the details that you dove into. It's so important. So we have about one or two more questions left before we'll open up to Q&A. This is something that I know the Women's Network has been talking about, and we shared a recent email, but the impact of COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted women as compared to men. And these impacts are causing upwards of 2 million women to consider leaving the workforce. And this is from added domestic unpaid work at home. It's from childcare, elderly care, all of these different reasons. And so, especially as of late, from your perspective, how can we keep women in tech in the workforce? And not only that, how can we, moving forward past COVID, get more women into tech at the end of the day? Sunita, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. I think right now it's very important to reach out to your teammates, to your coworkers, especially the ones who have families, to ask just like, hey, how are you doing? Like, I know childcare. Is your childcare open? Are you able to send your kid? Like, how are you balancing work? Like, is it hard for you? Are you homeschooling? Ask those questions. And sometimes we get so drowned in work and taking care of kids and schooling that we don't think that, oh my God, we are burdening ourselves so much. So I think it starts with the very first step as an individual is to reach out. Male, female, doesn't matter. Reach out and ask them, because that probably might help them to think that are they overburdening themselves, right? And I think the second is not to take, I think women do that and like take everything on their plate, because there are multiple reasons. They like doing things their own way. And there's this mindset, it's not going to take that much. I'll do it. Be very realistic of your capacity as a human being, of your brain, of your body, and then assess. And if you have a partner, ask for help. Like, hey, we need to balance this. This is affecting my life. And if that's why you need to reach out to your coworkers. Some of them might be struggling to have this conversation. They need maybe a little bit of support than just need this, a little bit of push from a friend or from a coworker. Oh, you got it. Just have a conversation. You're going to be fine, right? So I think that in the current times, I think that's very important, is to be mindful to reach out to your coworkers, to your family, to your friends, just to see where they are. And going forward, I feel as a manager, yes, I have the opportunity to tell the recruiting, HR recruiting person, hey, I want at least a balanced set of candidates that come my way. I don't want it to be skewed, right? That's one step. The second very important step is to provide the opportunity, even if you are not in a leadership role. I've definitely been on so many teams where I was the only girl. And in all of my one-on-ones, I brought it up to my managers. Like, don't get me wrong. I love this team. Nobody treats me bad. I enjoy it. Don't even for a second feel, or I don't feel microaggressions or stuff like that. But you are not hiring a diverse team. And as an individual contributor, you have that power, have the communication, with your manager, bring it up and say, hey, we are missing out on some good perspectives, some good ideas. And that goes back to women as if you on your team are seeing this decline, right, of women leaving the team or not enough of them getting hired, even if you're not in the position where you can make that decision, you can certainly influence that decision. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I have personally started trying to do this, is to reach out to my female coworkers. I know, especially the ones who have families, to see if I can be of any help. Is there something I can do to make sure that this COVID-19 is not making it worse than what it is for average person?
Good point.
So I think another thing is to be empathetic and try to understand what people are going through. It's interesting. Years ago, I worked with a person who was a great worker. During her pregnancy, she had terrible morning sickness, and she was sick all the time. I was single, didn't have any kids, didn't understand what she was going through. All I know is she was gone a lot. She wasn't, she was sick quite a bit of the time, and I didn't understand what she was going through until I got pregnant with my kid and had the exact same thing. So I just didn't quite have any. I didn't know how to have empathy at that time. And I think, just trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and having a conversation with them, maybe you can't do anything to help them out, but even just knowing that you're there and you're trying to understand what they're going through, and maybe they could bounce some things off of you. I think even that, to know that they've got that support, and somebody who's you know, maybe you can't help them out with their work, for example. So if somebody was a coder, I couldn't help them out. I could, you know, I could bring them a soda or some food, but, you know, can't do any coding. But just being there for your team and making sure that you're communicating and you know that or even your peers, that, you know, you've got their back and you're there to support them.
Yeah. So
That's huge. I think too, I like the both of you harped on just different examples, and empathy, Kathy, is huge. And Sunita, I really liked your examples on, you know, there's different decisions and impacts that you can make at a manager level, but exactly, you don't have to wait to be the manager level. You can have those conversations, you can drive influence, and it's critical to have those conversations. And if anybody needs advice on how to have those conversations, I'm sure any of our panelists would love to help, myself as well. But yeah, no, thank you for jumping into those. And any last, I'm going to open up to Q&A. I know we didn't get through all our questions, but any last thoughts on that last question before we jump into Q&A from the audience? All right. I have some other questions as well, but if anybody, I don't know if I saw some specific questions in the chat. So if you did, if anyone wants to retype and submit to the chat, we can open up and have our panel talk to any of your questions from the audience.
Yeah, we didn't have any in the chat.
Cool. I'll let people brainstorm a bit more. We do have a couple others we can jump into. And so I know, Carlita, you touched on this a little bit already. And for anybody that does want to jump in here, are there any additional ways as leaders that you can create inclusion and drive equality within your teams? I know we talked on it a little bit, but wanted to leave that one open again if we want to have just more even concrete examples for everybody.
Absolutely. So I think hiring, that was key, right? And so we have to proactively make sure that we're considering inclusion when we're making hiring decisions. But, you know, when you talk about examples, we had our staff meeting, I want to say last week, and I don't know how many of us know. I think as leaders, we should be aware of things like Hispanic Heritage Month. We should just know about those things that happen. And so in our staff meeting last week, we had David Casillas to actually talk to us. He did a couple of slides. We allotted time at the ending of our staff meeting for him to tell us, what is Hispanic Heritage Month? What are some of the things that's really important to the Latino community? I just learned that is Latino. What are some of the main dishes, you know, within that community, et cetera? And so I think that we as leaders, we have to make a concerted effort to educate ourselves, right? So leaders can do it, but individuals, I understand that it's awkward, right? Sometimes it's awkward to just go up to a person and say, explain to me this or explain to me that. But I tell you what's worse than that awkward moment of just educating yourself and trying to understand about different cultures and different backgrounds is walking around with stereotypes that are unaddressed. That is more awkward and it's just dumb, right? So the piece of advice that I would give people is there's just absolutely no way for you to say that I am inclusive, I include people, but you still do not proactively try to find ways to break down your unconscious biases and stereotypes. If you are not proactively as an individual, you can't depend on your manager to have, you know, your co-workers come and educate you. You have to take a step yourself, and you have to step outside your comfort zone, and you have to make this a priority for yourself. Because I will tell you that once you make it a priority for you, the people around you will join in. And once you make it a comfort zone to be able to ask someone with a different religious background, how is that? How does that work? Then you'll create an atmosphere where other people are comfortable as well. And it's a domino effect, right? I think, you know, especially in the world that we're in today, where we're just all separated and we're kind of all divided as a country, no one wants to step over that line and say, I just want to be neutral and understand what's the differences. What are you thinking? And what do you think? No one wants to do that. Everybody has to take sides. And so because of that, we're not going to have progression. So my bit of advice will be, educate yourselves. It's no different from 5G that's coming out. You don't know what 5G is. What do? You go to Barnes and Noble and you get a book, 5G for Dummies, right? So if you don't know what the Latina culture is, if you don't know what braids are versus dreads, if you don't know what hijab, I believe that's what I was taught, which is the scarf that our Muslim women wear. If you don't know what these things are, learn. It's just that simple, because until you do that, you're not going to be an inclusive person, no matter how much you say it. You're just not. So that would be my piece of advice. Educate yourself.
And to add on to that, it's the power of one person. Don't ever underestimate that, oh, I just learned it's going to help. You doing your part, it's like a million drops in the ocean. It starts from there. Don't ever underestimate yourself that, oh, if I'm just doing it, but nobody else is doing it. Do not care if other people. If you are inquisitive, educate yourself. It starts from you. As simple as that.
It does. It does. They say, what did they say? Be the change that you want to see, right? And so a lot of times, whether it's dealing with a cultural difference or whether it's a system or change, I'll be the dumb one and ask the question, because I feel that I can't be any dumber if I get off and don't ask. Right. So be the change that you want to see. Right. And there are some barriers that are already set for us that stop us from being inclusive. And all of them are not on purpose. Again, they're unconscious. So.
And I was just going to add, you really need to recognize, you know, internally, what are your unconscious biases? I tell you, the training that I'm not sure if the whole company had to go through the training recently that was in success factors, but there was a couple examples at the end where you walked through different scenarios. And one of them, and I don't recall all of the exacts of it, but at the end there was basically it was a female that was a doctor. And I'm telling you, sadly, my head went right to, before they said that, I assumed male, and I was shocked. I'm like, oh my Lord, how did I get there? It was, you know, truly, you've got to start with yourself and really try to break down those barriers within yourself first before you can recognize and help others, and by, you know, help yourself.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I'm going to say it has been like in the last decades, for example, diversity and inclusion being like a really hot topics. And it's probably not something that we change during like a day. And then so all this step by step, and then we'll probably see, and then don't underestimate your own like power, and just take action and step by step, and we'll get there eventually.
That's right. That's right. And you know what, Allison, I kind of go back to that example I gave in the beginning, right? Is you're throwing the party. You think about, well, I'll invite that person, sure. But if they stand against the wall or they're in the corner all by themselves, I still invited them. But how effective is that? If they're by themselves, you're not including them in all the rest of the activity. What good is it inviting them to the party? And then again, the challenge would be when you do sit down and put together your list, who's on your list? Who's even going to get an invitation, right? These are the types of things that we need to think about when we're thinking about inclusion as well as diversity, because there's truly, in my eyes, there's a difference. I can have a full diverse room, but if I'm only selecting of that diverse room who I want to listen to and who I want to include in my project meeting, I'll be honest with you, and I'm in tech, but sometimes my team will know when we want to talk about a strategic idea, what's the first thing I say? And I do it, I'm so bad. I'll say, yeah, that's not include IT just yet because they're going to complicate the conversation. I do it all the time, right? And I'm in tech. And so I have to step back and say, you know what? Let's include them, because as we talk through this strategic idea, they may tell me something about the system that's going to stop me from going down the path that I would go if I knew how the system worked. But I am I'm guilty. I'm the first one to be like, yeah, let's not include the database people because they're going to complicate the conversation. I do it myself. So we just got to be conscious about it and check ourselves when it happens.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end our panel event. Thank you, four of you, so much. Could chat all day about this topic. Thank you to everybody that joined as well. This video will be up on the Women's Network website later this week if you want to check it out or share it. Thank you again, kind of a clap out to all of our panelists. Super appreciate your time and examples, and super excited to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have
everyone.
a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much.